News are actually olds because they correspond to what we expect to happen.
These are the men who unleashed the dogs of war today.
Therefore, a study of the olds is very interesting indeed.
Victory is near, comrade.
Why so many endless wars and conflicts? To understand that, we have to understand what predicates geopolitical strategy. In short, a history to control, dominate, encircle, subterfuge, order out of chaos. It's what the Russians and British have called for centuries the Great Game. It was circa 1904 that Halford Mackinder, the British founder of geostrategy and geopolitics and a member of the notorious London School of Economics, came up with the Heartland theory, which concerns the Russian mainland. He theorized that he who controls the heartland is in the pivot position to control the entire world. The surrounding rimland was essentially putty to that end. But it was the Dutch-American geostrategist and professor at Yale, Nicholas Spickman, who leading up to World War II theorized the exact inverse, that the control of the rimland led to control of the heartland and thus the larger world island. It's these rimland countries encircling Russia in Eastern Europe, the Middle East, the Caucasus, Central Asia, and the Orient that were key to Spickman's theory of containment that proved so influential in the Cold War.
From the Bamboo Curtain to the Berlin Wall, we are maintaining our commitments. Standing firmly with our allies against communist designs for world conquest.
But chaos, not order, has been the result. Why? A closer look at Spickman's rimland reveals the work of opposites at play, pushing against each other in tension and crisis, much like tectonic plates under the Earth's crust. The rimland is more appropriately known as the arc of instability, a formula of the Hegelian dialectic. Madness and turmoil that has justified the presence of U.S. armed forces and its allies in countless conflicts in countries all around the arc of tension. The Korean Wars, which split North and South over communism.
Operation Killer in Korea grinds steadily forward and northward, where United Nations forces face a new adversary.
Maoist China, where communism conflicted with Shanghai Czech's nationals.
The communists have been able to propel Red China to a position of major influence.
The Taiwan issue, the Tibet issue, Vietnam.
I don't understand. Why? Why Vietnam?
Vietnam, where French Indochina became another communist split between North and South.
French troops are fighting the last battle of a long war over what had been called French Indochina. It's a strange three-cornered struggle. Non-communist Vietnamese fighting communist Vietnamese, and some of both fighting the French.
India and what was once Baluchistan, today Pakistan.
Again in India.
United under Gandhi's vision as a tolerant, secular, multiculturalist state, instead torn into rival states armed with nukes.
The Air Force flew in urgently needed arms at the request of India's government.
Afghanistan, at war with the Russians in the 80s.
We are fighting the same enemy. All the Muslims are fighting the Russians.
Before the war on terror with the U.S.
The most important resource is oil.
Iran, which suffered a coup to oust Mohammad Mossadegh in the 50s.
Developed by British interests, Iranian oil has been the subject of bitter dispute.
Which installed the Shah and saw the rise of radical Islam, the rule of the mullahs, a decade-long war with Iraq, and ongoing tensions with the U.S. Iraq, once a British colony, today a neo-colonial holding, saw the rise of Saddam Hussein, the Gulf War of the 90s.
Our goal was to put them into shock and destroy their ability to defend their homeland.
Attacked all of the strategic targets that I've spoken of, electrical power, communications, air defenses, and so forth.
And the Iraq War of 2003.
Quote, shock and awe.
Shots being fired now in Baghdad. I want our viewers to listen in.
Today it's seen the rise of ISIS and other forms of radical Islam, and there's talk of splitting it into three states between the Kurds and Shia and Sunni factions, now that the Ba'athist Party has been toppled. There's also the various Arab states created out of Arab tribes, mostly by the British and the French. Of course, today we're familiar with the various conflicts, civil wars, uprisings, and revolutions in places like Libya, Egypt, Syria, and of course Palestine and Israel, with Turkey here as a key pivot between East and West.
Our forces hold constant alerts to maintain this frontier of freedom.
In Eastern Europe, the Ukraine has seen conflict both now and then.
1932. Stalin wrote, "The situation in Ukraine is very bad. If we don't take steps now, we may lose Ukraine." The hunger began. Ukrainians were dying torturously slowly.
As has Poland.
The Poles, like the Hungarians, were breaking with the communist system. Political strikes led by the opposition movement Solidarity.
In their drive for world domination, the communists have identified different levels of possible conflict to exploit.
Communist coup in Czechoslovakia in 1948.
And standoffs in Czechoslovakia, which was at the time Soviet-held.
Czechoslovakia today became the latest of the countries of Eastern Europe.
It was true people power that toppled the hardline communist leaders here.
And the former Yugoslavia.
Prior to 1914, Serbia and Montenegro formed a single kingdom that was allied to Tsarist Russia. Slovenia and Croatia were part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, whose annexation of Bosnia-Herzegovina led to the assassination at Sarajevo of the Austrian Archduke by a Serb, and hence to the First World War.
Today broken up into several states, giving rise to the name Balkanization.
Demanded Serbian control over the Albanians.
The modern resurgence of the Cold War with Russia has seen tense standoffs with Poland, Ukraine, and Georgia.
The fighting followed months of escalating tension between Russia and Georgia. War erupted on August the 7th, when Georgia began this ferocious bombardment of one of its own regions, called South Ossetia.
Located here at a pivotal point between Iran, Iraq, Turkey, and Russia.
Which he calls wars of liberation and popular revolt, but which we prefer to call subversion and covert aggression. It is these wars which Khrushchev says are not only admissible, but inevitable.
Not only are these constant and evolving tensions an ongoing recipe justifying intervention in the region throughout the Rimland, in some ways these conflicts are made inevitable through the relative artificial mapping of states against the ethnicities scattered throughout the region. As was done after both world wars. After World War I, Mackinder introduced geostrategy in helping to draw the new lines of the countries. Leading up to World War II, Spickman, though he died before the end of the war, influenced the carving up of the world through the eyes of the containment plan. Is the end game near on this larger grand chessboard? The great game goes on between Russia and the Anglo-American Empire. For our sake, let's hope it doesn't end in a World War III type scenario.